Imagine for a moment that you are traveling alone in a country where you don't speak a word of the language. You've developed a sudden and severe allergic reaction. Your throat is tight, your skin is itching, and you are starting to feel a sense of panic. You walk into a pharmacy to get help. At first, the pharmacist is concerned and wants to help you. You try to speak, but he just shakes his head and looks confused. You point to your throat, but he thinks you are pointing to your scarf, so he compliments you in his language. Next, you try to grab a bottle of medication behind the counter to show him what you need, but he pulls it away and scolds you for being aggressive. Now you're terrified. You start crying and waving your arms because the physical pain is too much. In response, the pharmacist calls security and tells them you are making a scene. In this moment, you aren't being bad or dramatic. You are a person in pain who has been denied the tools to ask for relief. For your child, every day can feel like this pharmacy scenario. Behavior is a form of communication, a message to be decoded. Behavior often is serving a function. We can remember the four most common functions of behavior with the acronym SEAT. The S stands for sensory. Our loved ones may behave inappropriately because they are seeking sensory input. The E stands for escape. Sometimes the only way our loved one can tell us they don't like something is by trying to get away from it. The A stands for attention. Many of us say nothing when our child is behaving well, yet provide lots of attention if they are misbehaving. If this is the case, our loved one may seek out our engagement through negative behaviors. The T stands for tangible, but it may be easier to remember this as touch or try. Negative behavior can occur because a person wants access to an item or a preferred activity. One method that can help you to determine the function of a behavior or why it occurs is the ABC method. Behavioral interventionists frequently use this method to break down behaviors and to develop intervention strategies. The A stands for antecedent and is everything that happens immediately before the behavior starts. The B stands for behavior and is the specific observable action that the person does. The C stands for consequence and is everything that happens immediately after the behavior. As an example, let's imagine a scenario where a child is sitting in a classroom. The teacher asks her to read from her textbook. She becomes upset and throws the book. The teacher then scolds the student and tells her to go to the hallway. By honing in on these parts of the scenario, we can initiate changes that will reduce negative behaviors. The antecedent, for example, helps us to understand why the behavior may have occurred. What setup led to the behavior? It could be environmental, things like background noise, unexpected sounds, quick movements, or visual stimuli. Dynamics in the environment can overwhelm a person's brain and cause them to act out. It could be caused by a request or demand that felt overwhelming, being called on by a teacher, a heavy expectation, or being told no. Any one of these has the potential to trigger a fight or flight response. This student also could have an internal stimulus playing into the situation. They could be hungry, tired, cold, or in pain. For a child who cannot communicate, or one who struggles with processing these feelings, a request delivered on top of this undesired physical state can lead to an outburst. When we monitor antecedents, we can identify patterns and begin to predict when a behavior is likely to occur. This enables a shift from being reactive to being proactive in preventing problems. At the behavior stage of the incident, we are evaluating what happened or the action that took place. Using observation and data, we can determine if the maladaptive behavior occurred because an individual is missing a skill, like frustration tolerance or the ability to wait, or if there is an unmet need driving the behavior, perhaps a sensory need, a desire to be validated, or a yearning for more autonomy or agency. By noticing the intensity, duration, and timing of behaviors, we can determine the severity of the need. By analyzing the maladaptive behaviors that occur, we can better support our loved ones and teach replacement behaviors and skills. Consequences are the immediate occurrences following the behavior and can be the payoff that keeps the behavior going. You may have heard the saying, "All behavior serves a function." Your loved one may be getting something out of a recurring behavior. There could be a perceived win that comes after the behavior. For example, consider a parent who doesn't notice their child signing to request a cookie, but then sees them hitting the counter near the cookie. In response to the noise, the parent hands the child a cookie. This reinforces the hitting behavior rather than the requesting behavior. Children may use negative behavior to gain attention, or it may be the dopamine hit that they get from a person's strong response that feels like a win. Another form of payoff is getting to avoid an undesired activity or a demand. In our school example, the child was told to leave the classroom after throwing her book. If what she wanted was to get out of the classroom, this consequence reinforced the negative behavior. Surprisingly, intermittent rewards provide the greatest challenge for eliminating a behavior, even more than a consistent consequence. The reason is that this type of response is a lot like a slot machine. If a parent says no to a request 5 times, but then gives in on the 6th request, it teaches the child that persistence pays off. Inconsistent consequences create the strongest, most addictive habits. By examining behavior consequences, we can discover what is keeping the behavior alive. By shifting our responses, we can influence our children toward more appropriate behavior. Now that you've learned a little bit about the ABC method, let's cover the main takeaways. First, behavior is a form of communication, and it usually serves a function. There are many factors that can cause maladaptive behavior. A need for sensory input, too much sensory input, pain, hunger, unmet needs, or feeling overwhelmed. Any one of these antecedents can elicit negative behaviors. Behavior can also occur as a result of reinforcement. Your child will use whatever works, whether that's getting loud, being aggressive, or asking nicely. To change behavior, we need to make the undesired behavior result in a boring consequence, and the desired behavior result in a highly valued consequence. To determine the source of the behavior and how to shift it, we need to get curious, stay calm, and observe.